Why would a colonel laugh at a 12-year-old girl? That question hung in the air of the officers' club like smoke, settling over polished tables and starched uniforms. The laughter was sharp, metallic, and it came from Colonel Bradford, a man whose bulk and booming presence had long since convinced him that authority equaled respect. He stood surrounded by SEALs and junior officers, his voice dripping with condescension as he pointed toward the small figure near the display case. "Little girls should stick to dolls, not rifles," he declared, the words laced with the kind of superiority only someone certain of his own untouchable position could summon. Skye didn't flinch. She simply turned her eyes from the relics in the glass case, an old naval trident, a faded photograph, a pistol with history carved into its scratches, and looked directly at him. Her small hand rested against a worn leather case that seemed too heavy for her size. Inside it lay the only thing she treasured more than the silver pendant around her neck. The pendant caught the morning light filtering through the Spanish-styled windows, scattering reflections across the floor. A trident, miniature and delicate, once belonging to her mother, Lieutenant, a name most here had forgotten. A name that still made her father pause when spoken aloud. Watched from across the room, caught between pride and dread. He knew this moment was coming. 3 years after his wife's death, their daughter had been building toward it quietly, methodically, determined to honor in the only way she knew how, by asking to step onto the range her mother had once dominated. But also knew the world wasn't kind to girls who asked for things men guarded. "Sir," his voice was steady, almost too steady for her age, "it isn't a toy, it's my shooting kit." That single sentence silenced half the room, not because of what she said, but because of how she said it, like it was fact, like it demanded no apology. Sneered, amused rather than impressed. "And I suppose Daddy lets you play with real guns, too." Was moving now, abandoning his report to Major Wright. His voice came out measured, restrained, but with a hard edge. "Colonel, there might be a misunderstanding here." But wasn't interested in understanding. He was interested in dominance. His eyes raked uniform, the faded maintenance supervisor badge that told a story already thought he knew. A man who once served but now reduced to base support. A man beneath him. "No misunderstanding at all," cut in. "Your daughter is in an officers' club talking about shooting equipment like she's some kind of marksman. That's inappropriate, reflects poorly on your family." Felt heat rising in his chest, but spoke before he could. Her chin lifted slightly and her voice carried. "My mother was a Navy sniper." The words landed like a rifle crack. Some of the SEALs shifted uncomfortably, not because of disbelief, but because of the weight of conviction behind the girl's voice. His laugh rang out sharp and cruel. "A sniper, of course, and I suppose she saved the world with her amazing skills, a bedtime story." That's when another voice entered the space. Calm, professional, cutting through the colonel's performance. "Colonel." Captain Miles Foster, Precision Range Safety Officer, stepped forward, coffee forgotten in his hand. He had been listening, evaluating, weighing. His eyes went from to the girl. "If there's discussion about marksmanship training, I'd like to be involved. That's my lane." For a moment the colonel bristled, but Foster's attention wasn't on him, it was on. "What kind of training have you had?" he asked gently but directly. Straightened. "My mother started with safety, chamber checks, muzzle discipline, trigger control, breathing. Then she worked me up to precision distances. I've trained mostly with bolt-action rifles, some semi-automatics." She said consistency mattered more than variety. The room shifted, even noticed it. There was no hesitation in her answers, no childish imagination, just knowledge. Another figure stepped forward, her presence unmistakable even before she spoke. Master Chief Cross, combat veteran, one of the Navy's best marksmanship instructors, her gaze fixed on the girl, narrowing with recognition. "Lieutenant," she said quietly, almost to herself. "Phantom 7, Best natural shooter I ever worked with. Froze, he hadn't known anyone here would remember by call sign. Eyes widened. You knew her, she whispered. Cross nodded, her voice softening. She could put 5 rounds through a quarter at 400 meters, saved lives with those skills. She wasn't just a sniper, she was one of the best. The colonel's smile faltered just slightly, but his pride wouldn't let him retreat. So what? We're supposed to let a child play soldier because her mother had a record. Cross's expression hardened. With supervision, there's no regulation preventing it. If she's trained, she deserves a chance. Stepped forward then, her hand resting on the case at her side. Her voice was calm, certain. If you don't believe my mother taught me anything useful, I'd be happy to demonstrate. The challenge fell into the silence like a stone into still water, rippling outward. Some looked shocked, others intrigued. Eyes lit with something darker, cruel amusement. You know what? He said, voice rising with theatrical satisfaction. That's an excellent idea. Let's see what Mommy's training looks like, on the range, with witnesses. His throat tightened. He wanted to stop it, shield her. But when looked up at him, her eyes weren't afraid. They were determined. Eyes staring back through her daughter. Dad, she whispered, it's okay, I want to do this. He saw it then, the same expression wore before impossible missions. Grief and pride tangled in his chest. Slowly, he nodded. All right, he said. His voice was steady now, sharp enough to cut. Let's go to the range. The group began to move, drawn by something none of them could name, but all of them felt. The pull of a moment that might expose arrogance or reveal something far greater. Strutted, mocking as they walked. But Master Chief Cross stayed close to, her stride protective, professional. The morning fog had begun to lift outside, revealing the sweep of the Pacific, endless and blue. Held her case tightly, silver pendant glinting at her throat. In just minutes, she would stand on the same range where her mother once stood, a rifle in her hands, the weight of legacy and doubt pressing down in equal measure. She had no idea how many people would soon be watching, or how far the echoes of her shots would travel. But she knew this. She wasn't here to prove herself to a colonel. She was here to honor her mother. And nothing was going to stop her. How far could a 12-year-old really go? That was the question in every whispered conversation as the strange procession moved through Naval Station. A colonel leading with puffed-up certainty, a child carrying a leather case, a grieving father walking tight-lipped beside her, and behind them, operators, instructors, and curious staff who had dropped everything to follow. The fog was thinning, sunlight spilling gold over the Spanish-tiled roofs. Somewhere, a gull cried, its echo faint against the crash of the Pacific beyond the ridges. Felt all of it, the weight of eyes on her, the hush of expectation, the raw pull of memory that lived in her trident pendant. She walked with even steps, not rushing, not hesitating. His voice filled the silence, smug and booming. Let's all remember why we're here, to demonstrate exactly why children don't belong near military weapons. One mistake and you'll see, fantasy has no place in the real world. Some nodded, some frowned, others said nothing. Master Chief Cross kept her pace steady beside the girl, her tone measured and low. The wind here is tricky, coastal thermals, you'll want to watch the flags. I know, answered softly. Mom taught me about mirage and shimmer, how wind bends the bullet, how heat lifts it. Cross glanced at her. The girl wasn't boasting. She was reciting, remembering, his voice alive in her. Lieutenant West, newly trained as a marksmanship instructor, leaned closer to Commander Murphy as they neared the range. That's advanced knowledge. Mirage patterns. Most recruits can't even explain wind drift. Murphy said nothing. His eyes were on the girl. Precision Point Range came into view at last, sprawling between ridges. Its concrete firing lines stretched toward targets that shimmered in the distance. From 25 meters to 800, steel plates and paper silhouettes waited like silent judges. The crowd swelled as word spread. Maintainers left tool carts half-finished. Operators cut training runs short. By the time the group reached the control tower, 24 personnel had gathered. Some smirked at the absurdity. Others looked uneasy. Turned, his boots grinding on gravel. Let be clear, this isn't some talent show. This is proof. Proof that bloodlines and bedtime stories don't make a sniper. Clenched his fists, knuckles whitening. He wanted to shut up, but then he looked at, she wasn't angry, she wasn't rattled. Her expression was still calm, the same way used to steady herself before a shot. Chief Max stepped forward, a man with years of shaping shooters into marksmen. His tone was patient but firm. Before she touches a weapon, she'll pass a safety evaluation. My evaluation. For 15 minutes drilled her. Weapon checks, chamber flags, ricochet dangers, emergency stoppages. She answered everything without hesitation, her voice clear, her words precise. Never assume safe, she said. Always check chamber and well yourself. If a malfunction happens, stop, muzzle down range. Engage safety. Signal the range officer. Never clear a complex stoppage without supervision. Each answer built a picture. This wasn't play acting. This was drilled discipline. Looked at Murphy, then at Cross. Her safety knowledge exceeds half the recruits I've trained. I'd trust her on my line. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Scowled, but his voice carried again. Knowledge isn't skill. Let's see execution. The case opened with a snap. Inside lay the girl's tools. Hearing protection, glasses, notebook, spotting scope, even a small kit for sight adjustments. Everything arranged with soldierly precision. West muttered under his breath, "That's professional grade. Someone been investing in her training." Cross's lips curved faintly. Always said preparation was half the battle. Equipment checks, environment, mental focus. She taught that before she let anyone touch a trigger. Captain Foster, range safety officer, finished setting up the first lane. We'll start at 25 meters. Prone, supported 5 rounds. The girl nodded, slipping the glasses on, pulling ear protection snug. She lay flat, sliding the rifle into position. Her movements weren't clumsy. They were fluid, practiced. The range fell silent, folded his arms, waiting for the inevitable failure. His breathing slowed, 4-count cycle, inhale, exhale halfway, hold, squeeze. The crack of the rifle shattered the stillness, echoing off the ridges. A metallic ping followed, steel struck. Murphy lowered his binoculars slowly, disbelief giving way to respect. Dead center bulls, first shot. A stir rippled through the crowd, barked, "One shot proves nothing, anyone can get lucky." Cross's voice cut through, calm and steady. "Miss, fire a full string, 5 rounds, standard scoring." "Yes, ma'am." The rifle cracked again, then again. 5 sharp reports in measured rhythm. Each one echoed, followed by the ringing of steel. The group surged toward spotting scopes, binoculars snapping into focus. What they saw left them silent. 5 shots, all grouped so tightly in the bullseye that they tore a single jagged hole. Foster's voice carried, full of awe. Group size, 1 inch at 25 meters, exceeds expert qualification standards. The range buzzed with disbelief. Some cursed softly under their breath, others just stared. West whispered, "That's not luck, that's fundamentals, drilled perfect." For the first time, his expression cracked. His smirk faltered, jaw tightening. He struggled to reclaim ground. Close range means nothing. Recruits learn that in weeks. Real marksmanship begins at 300 meters. The words hung like a challenge. Everyone looked to the girl. She lifted her cheek from the stock, turning to her father. Her eyes asked a question without words. His chest constricted. He saw his face in her, saw her steady determination. His voice broke softly. "You don't have to prove anything more." She gave the smallest of smiles, gentle, firm. "I want to." Cross studied her, weighing it, then nodded. "Extended range it is. But remember, 300 meters is different. Wind, elevation, mirage. It magnifies every mistake. I understand, replied. Her tone didn't shake. Foster called out, prep the 300-meter lane. The crowd shifted again, energy thickening like a storm. As she walked toward the longer firing line, his voice followed, sneering. Let's end this fantasy once and for all. At real distance, you'll see the difference between stories and soldiers. But even as he spoke, eyes were no longer on him. They were on the girl with the trident pendant glinting at her throat, the girl who carried her mother's ghost in every breath. She was walking toward 300 meters, toward a test meant to break her. But something in the way she carried herself suggested she wasn't walking toward failure. She was walking toward history. What would 300 meters reveal? The question pressed into every silence as settled behind the bolt-action rifle now laid out for her. This was no classroom drill. At 300, the bullseye was smaller than a dinner plate. Heat shimmer curled in the distance, and even a whisper of wind could send a round wide. She adjusted the stock, her hands small but steady. The scope the target, drawing the world down to rings of black and white. Around her, the murmurs quieted. Soldiers, sailors, officers, men who had seen combat, leaned forward without realizing it. Colonel stood rigid, arms folded. His voice cut the silence like a knife. Let's see her try. Close-range parlor tricks don't impress me. Out here, we'll separate fantasy from reality. Master Chief Cross crouched beside the girl, her tone measured, instructive but calm. Wind flags are showing a steady left to right. Call it 5 miles per hour. What's your correction? Exhaled slowly. 2 minutes right, maybe 2.5 with this bullet weight. Cross blinked. That wasn't guessing, that was calculation. Lieutenant West confirmed it with his own scope, muttering to Commander Murphy, she's dead on. That's graduate-level reading. Stood behind the line, every muscle tight. His chest ached with the same pride and dread that had shadowed him since death. His daughter was a child, but right now she carried the weight of her mother's ghost and the eyes of the Navy. Range is clear, Captain Foster called. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed curiosity. Shooter ready. Breath slow, 4-count cycle just as Ed taught her. Inhale, exhale halfway, hold, squeeze. The rifle cracked. The spotters froze. Chief Scope tracked the shot, his voice stunned. Impact dead center, bullseye, no deviation. For a heartbeat, the range was silent. Then whispers broke like a wave. No way. Check the scope. That's impossible. His jaw clenched. Error must be target placement. No 12-year-old hits like that. Lieutenant West shook his head, already logging the data. Targets calibrated. That hit is real. Commander Murphy's voice carried, calm but firm. Miss, can you repeat that? 5-round group standard evaluation. Nodded without hesitation. Yes, sir. His throat tightened. She wasn't afraid, she wasn't even nervous. She looked relieved, like she had finally been allowed to show the truth. She adjusted again. The world narrowed to the reticle, the wind flags, the shimmer of heat, one breath at a time. Crack ping. Crack ping. Crack ping. 5 times. Spotting scope swung back, operators crowding close. What they saw was almost unbelievable. 5 holes torn so close they could be covered by a hand. Announced it with reverence. 5 rounds, 1.5-inch group at 300 meters. That's advanced sniper qualification. The words landed heavy. Not a child's lucky string, not a fluke. Qualification. Silence blanketed the range. Even the gulls overhead seemed to fall quiet. Cross's lips pressed together, eyes bright with memory. His blood runs strong, she murmured. Swallowed hard, his vision blurring. For 3 years he had tried to protect his daughter from the world, and now the world was watching her become what she was always meant to be. Dr. Pierce, who had been evaluating stress responses from the sidelines, spoke at last. She isn't rattled, heart rate steady, breathing regulated. She's calmer under scrutiny than most candidates in training. The SEALs who had chuckled earlier now stared at the girl with something between awe and unease. Smirk was gone entirely. His denial showed in the sharpness of his voice. Coincidence. She can recite theory fine, but this is a trick, an act. Marksmanship isn't a child's game. Cross straightened, her gaze locking on him. Colonel, you're watching proof. You can deny it if it protects your pride, but it doesn't change what just happened. His face flushed, but before he could retort, the faint thump of rotors grew louder over the ridges. Every head turned. A helicopter, low fast descending toward the base. Captain Foster frowned. Range didn't clear incoming. He pressed a hand to his headset, listening. Identification code, Pentagon clearance, priority transport. The wind whipped across the range as the aircraft touched down on the landing zone. Dust swirled, scattering paper targets. The thrum of blades filled the valley. Stiffened, his bravado faltering. Pentagon. That meant someone somewhere had already heard. Reports had flown faster than he realized. The rotors slowed, and the figure who stepped out made even seasoned SEALs straighten instinctively. Silver hair, weathered features, the kind of presence that silenced a crowd without a word. Admiral Wells. She walked toward them with measured stride, her uniform neat but her eyes sharp, scanning everything. The rifle on the bench, the cluster of personnel, the girl still prone behind the scope. Major Wright hurried forward, her salute crisp, her words careful. Admiral, we weren't expecting. Wells cut her off with a raised hand. Her gaze never left the line. I received reports of extraordinary marksmanship, civilian personnel, a child. She stopped, her eyes landing squarely on, that's her. The crowd shifted uneasily, cleared his throat, struggling for composure. Admiral, I assure you this is under full safety protocol. Colonel, Wells said sharply, silencing him. Then softer to Murphy, what did you observe? Murphy didn't hesitate. Ma'am, she exceeded advanced sniper qualification. 1.5-inch group at 300 meters, repeated performance, professional safety discipline. For the first time, Admiral Wells's expression changed. A flicker of something personal, recognition. Name, she asked. Rose to her feet, brushing dust from her uniform pants. She stood than most recruits, chin up, voice clear. Ma'am. The Admiral's eyes sharpened at the surname. A pause, subtle but heavy. She studied the girl's face, the silver pendant shining at her throat. Stepped forward, protective but respectful. Her mother was lieutenant, killed in action 3 years ago. Something passed across Wells's weathered features, a flash of memory, perhaps regret. Then she nodded once, as though a puzzle piece had fallen into place. Lieutenant's daughter, she said quietly. The crowd exchanged glances. They had never heard the Admiral soften her tone like that. She looked back her voice was steady, but there was a weight beneath it. You've honored your mother well today, very well. Held her gaze. She told me skills fade if you don't maintain them. A murmur rippled through the ranks. Some smiled faintly. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Admiral Wells didn't smile, but her eyes held something deeper. Calculation, curiosity, and maybe, just maybe, recognition. Because she knew something the others didn't. Something about the bloodline. And she wasn't about to leave without testing how far it went. Why had Admiral Wells come in person? The question stirred uneasily through the gathering, as the Admiral's presence turned what had begun as a petty confrontation into something far greater. Pentagon brass did not descend on ranges without purpose. Not for a child. Not unless the implications ran deeper than anyone could see. Admiral Wells stood firm, her hands clasped behind her back, her gaze sweeping across the assembled personnel before settling again on the girl who had just silenced them all with her shooting. Felt the weight of that gaze. It wasn't like mocking eyes or the respectful looks from Murphy and Cross. This was different. Searching. Measuring. "Miss," the Admiral said at last, her voice even clipped, but with an undertone of something softer. "Who trained you?" His hand instinctively touched the trident pendant at her neck. "My mother, ma'am. Lieutenant, she started teaching me when I was 7. The Admiral's lips pressed into a line, as though the answer had confirmed something she already suspected. A hush fell as she drew a breath, her eyes lingering on the pendant. Master Chief Cross stepped forward, voice steady but edged with memory. "Admiral, I served with Lieutenant in Afghanistan. She was the finest natural shooter I've ever known, carries her exact discipline." Wells gave the slightest nod. "Yes, his record is known to me." Shifted uncomfortably, sensing the evasive tone. He had heard officers speak that way before when the truth was buried under layers of classification. He cleared his throat. "With respect, ma'am, you knew my wife." Wells didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned to Dr. Pierce, who had been quietly taking notes, his expression unreadable. "Psychological profile." Pierce adjusted his glasses, speaking with clinical precision. "Miss demonstrates extraordinary composure under stress, stable heart rate, no visible performance anxiety. She responds to scrutiny with increased focus, not collapse. That's atypical for her age." Wells's expression barely shifted, but her eyes sharpened. "Not atypical," she said softly. "Inherited." The word hung heavy, unexplained, but unmistakably intentional. Felt something tighten in his gut. Inherited. Not taught, not trained, something deeper. He stepped forward, his voice firmer now. "Admiral, with respect, what exactly are you suggesting?" Wells regarded him for a long moment, as if deciding how much truth could be spoken aloud. Finally, her gaze returned to, "Your mother was exceptional, but her skill did not come from nowhere. It was passed down." Frowned slightly, confusion flashing across her face. "Passed down from who?" The Admiral reached into the leather case she carried, producing a folder thick with time-worn photographs and papers. She pulled free a single black and white image and held it out. His breath caught. The woman in the picture wore an old naval uniform, the kind issued decades ago. Her face was unmistakable, the same eyes, the same sharp cheekbones. She held a rifle like it was part of her body, not an object. His hand trembled as she took the photo. "That's Mom." Wells shook her head slowly. "No, that's your grandmother." The range fell silent. The air seemed to thin, every ear straining for the words that followed. "Chief Warrant Officer," Wells continued, her tone clipped but carrying an edge of reverence. "One of the Navy's first female special operations snipers. Officially, she was listed as killed in action. Unofficially, she went underground for missions that never reached the public record. She is alive, and she has watched you your whole life." Staggered as though struck, his knees nearly gave, but he forced himself upright, jaw tight. "That's impossible. Told me her parents died when she was a child. Car accident. She grew up in foster care. She was told what she had to be told," Wells interrupted sharply. "To protect her, to protect you, was never dead. She was serving, always serving." Stared at the photograph, her breath quickening. Her chest rose and fell in short, sharp bursts. "She's alive." "She's alive," Wells confirmed. "And she knows who you are. She has followed your progress from a distance. She knows what happened to, and she knows what you did here today." The words hit like thunder. A living grandmother hidden by secrecy, watching but never touching. His voice cracked, anger breaking through. "All these years, my wife thought she had no family. She thought she was alone, and you let her believe it." Wells's jaw tightened. "Need to know, mister. That is the price of operations most of the world will never hear about. It is the price of keeping enemies from exploiting bloodlines as weapons." His fists clenched. Bloodlines, the word chilled him. "So this is about genetics then, programs. Is that why you're here, to recruit my daughter into some pipeline?" Wells didn't flinch. She stepped closer to, her voice softening just slightly. Miss, I won't insult you with promises or threats. What you demonstrated today cannot be ignored. Talent like yours, heritage like yours, demands recognition. The question is not if you'll serve. The question is how. Lifted her eyes from the photograph. Her voice was small, almost childlike for the first time that morning. I just wanted to honor Mom, that's all. Cross placed a hand gently on the girl's shoulder. And you did, more than you know. But Wells wasn't finished. Her gaze bore into the child with quiet intensity. You may not understand now, but your mother was part of something larger, and your grandmother still is. Both believed that gifts like yours aren't accidents. They're legacies, legacies with responsibilities. His throat tightened. She wanted to ask more about her grandmother, about why it had been kept in the dark, about why she had been alone all these years, but the words caught in her chest, tangled in grief and shock. Stepped between them then, protective, his voice low but sharp. Ma'am, with respect, she's 12, she's not a soldier, she's a child. You can't just— Mr. Wells interrupted quietly. I am not blind to her age, but history doesn't care how old she is. History will remember what she did today, and so will those who would use her. Better that we prepare her than leave her exposed. The warning landed heavy. His heart hammered. He looked at his daughter standing straight, eyes locked on the photograph of a woman she had never met. He saw confusion, sorrow, pride, all tangled together. And for the first time since the confrontation began, realized something terrifying. There were forces in motion now that he could not stop. The crowd remained hushed, waiting, but the silence carried weight, the kind of silence that comes before a storm. The Admiral closed the folder and tucked it back beneath her arm. Her words were final but heavy with meaning. Miss, prepare yourself. Your grandmother is en route, and when she arrives, the truth will no longer be theory. It will be standing before you. Gripped the photograph, her knuckles white. Her heart raced, caught between hope and fear. Her grandmother, alive, watching. And coming. What would you say to a ghost who wore your face? That thought tore through his mind as the second helicopter arrived, its blades cutting the coastal air into thunder. Personnel scrambled back, dust rising in choking clouds. The entire range seemed to hold its breath. Clutched the photograph Admiral Wells had given her. She stared through the haze, her pulse a hammer against her throat. Every fiber of her wanted to believe, every fiber of her feared disappointment. The side door slid open. A figure stepped out. Not frail, not hunched, not some fragile grandmother hidden away by time, moved with the controlled grace of a soldier who had lived her life by discipline. Her hair was silver but cut short, practical. Her posture was straight, her stride even. The years had carved lines into her face, but her eyes, sharp, steady, relentless, were mirrors of— His breath caught, she couldn't move, couldn't blink. It was like seeing her mother's ghost, older, sterner, but unmistakably connected. Felt his legs weaken. Rage and awe warred inside him. He had buried his wife 3 years ago, believing her lineage had ended. And now here stood her mother, alive, carrying secrets he had never been allowed to know. His boots crunched against gravel as she approached. She ignored the crowd, the salutes, the weight of Admiral Wells standing nearby. Her gaze locked on one person only. Yes. The child who bore her daughter's features. The child who had fired with impossible precision. The child she had never been allowed to hold. When she stopped a meter away, silence fell so thick it felt like the world had paused. His lips trembled, her voice broke into a whisper, "Grandma." His throat tightened. For the first time her composure wavered. She raised a gloved hand and brushed her fingers along the girl's cheek, gentle as a prayer. "I should have been here," she whispered. "But they told me staying away was the only way to keep you safe." Collapsed into her, arms wrapping tight around the woman's waist. The sob that escaped her chest was raw, unguarded. Held her fiercely, eyes closing, the soldiers cracking to reveal a grandmother's grief. His jaw clenched, his fists shook. You watched my wife die, didn't you? You knew, and you let her think she was alone. His eyes opened, meeting his across the girl's hair. Guilt lived there, heavy and unspoken. I didn't choose it. Orders, compartmentalization. Was never supposed to know who I was. It was control. They believed bloodlines couldn't fall into the wrong hands. His voice rose, anger spilling past restraint. She died thinking she had no family, and now you stand here asking for forgiveness like it's just protocol. Wells stepped forward, her voice sharp. This isn't the time, Mr. Chief. Service was. Service? Snapped, cutting her off. His grief roared out of him. My daughter lost her mother, and now you parade this woman out like some relic of secrecy. My family isn't a project. My daughter isn't a weapon. The air trembled with his words. Didn't flinch. She stepped closer, her hand still resting on shoulder. You're right to hate me. I hate myself for what was made to believe. But you need to understand something. What runs in her veins runs in your daughter's. And if you think the world won't notice, you're wrong. It already has. Looked at his daughter then. She clung to, her shoulders shaking with the tears she hadn't shown all morning. His chest broke open with helplessness. Wells's tone lowered, firm but quieter now. Mister, this isn't about recruitment. Not today. It's about recognition. You've seen what she can do. Pretending otherwise won't protect her. The only question is who stands with her when the world comes calling. Silence hung deep and raw. Wiped her face against his shoulder, then looked up. Her voice was small but steady. Mom always told me, dignity doesn't shout, it just acts. The words hit like a bullet. It's words. She closed her eyes briefly, pulling strength from the memory. She was right, said softly, and she lived that truth until the end. His throat tightened. Tell me about her. The request cracked armor completely. She knelt, eye to eye with the girl, and for the first time since stepping from the helicopter, she wasn't a covert operator, wasn't a ghost of classified missions. She was simply a mother who had lost a daughter. She laughed more than people remember, said, her voice breaking. She would hum while she cleaned her rifle. She hated the sound of empty brass hitting concrete, so she'd catch it in her hand when she could. She was stubborn and brilliant, and she loved you more than life. His tears fell again, but this time they carried warmth as well as grief. Turned away, his eyes burning. He couldn't reconcile it. The anger, the betrayal, the strange relief that at least part of his bloodline still lived. Admiral Wells cleared her throat gently, but her tone had shifted. Less commanding, more solemn. This isn't the end of the conversation. The department will have questions. But for today, she glanced at the girl, then for today you are family, and family deserves time. She signaled to her aide and stepped back, giving space. The crowd, sensing the gravity of what had unfolded, began to disperse in silence. No one dared break the fragile moment. Even, once full of jeers, stood stiff and pale, his words silenced by the undeniable weight of legacy before him. Held his face in her hands, memorizing her features. You are stronger than I ever was, stronger than your mother even, but strength will hurt you if you carry it alone. The girl nodded faintly, as if she understood, though she could not yet know the depths of that truth. The Pacific wind picked up, scattering grit across the firing line. The sun was dipping westward, golden light spilling across the range. Looked at them, his daughter and the woman he should have hated but could not. His voice was hoarse when it came. If you're here now, then stay. No more shadows. No more watching from a distance. His eyes glistened. She nodded once, slow and deliberate. No more shadows. Clutched the pendant at her neck, heart steadying for the first time since the morning began. She had started the day alone, laughed at by men who doubted her. Now, as the sun bled into the horizon, she stood between her father and her grandmother, rooted not only in skill but in a lineage she had never known she carried. For the first time she felt whole. But deep inside, she also felt something else. A tremor of fear. Because she understood now, Her gift wasn't just hers, it was inherited, a legacy bigger than she imagined, a legacy others would not leave untouched. And as she looked out across the range, the bullseyes gleaming faintly in the distance, she knew this wasn't the end of her trial. It was only the beginning. Was it a blessing to carry skill you never asked for? That question gnawed at as the range emptied, the sun burning low over the Pacific. She sat on the worn concrete bench, her rifle case closed, her pendant clutched in her hand. The cheers and whispers of the morning had faded, but the weight of them lingered like shadows. Her grandmother stood a few feet away, speaking quietly with Admiral Wells and Dr. Pierce. Their words were clipped, coded, heavy with meanings could not yet decode. Her father paced near the tower, his jaw tight, his eyes burning with an anger he tried to keep contained. Colonel had not left. He lingered at the edge of the firing line, arms crossed, face locked in a scowl that had soured since the girl's first shot. Pride had curdled into something harsher, resentment. He had been laughed at before in his career, but never by silence, never by proof. He muttered low to Captain Foster, loud enough for others to hear. It was staged. Someone been grooming her for this. The name is just propaganda fuel. We'll find the cracks. Foster said nothing. His silence was not agreement. It was disbelief that still fought what the steel plates had already proven. His voice cut through, sharp even in her restraint. You'll find no cracks, Colonel. My granddaughter shoots because she was born to. No agenda, no fabrication. Sneered, born to, exactly the kind of the brass drools over. His eyes flicked toward Wells. Bloodlines as destiny, weapons bred, not trained. We both know where that leads. The Admiral's gaze hardened, but she didn't deny it. She only said, it leads where we choose to take it, and choice is the only difference between dignity and exploitation. Stopped packing, his voice raw. Choice? She's 12. She shouldn't be standing here with the weight of your politics and your programs pressing on her shoulders. She should be in school, not the crosshairs of Pentagon interest. Wells regarded him evenly. Mister, you underestimate how fast the world takes notice. If we ignore her, others won't. She is safer with us. Stepped closer, his grief simmering into fury. My wife believed service was sacrifice. She died carrying that burden. And now you're circling her daughter like vultures, dressing it up as protection. You call it safety. I call it ownership. Silence followed, a silence too sharp to break. Then unexpectedly, his voice filled the gap, small but steady. I don't want to be owned by anyone. All eyes turned. She gripped her pendant tight, her gaze steady on the Admiral. I wanted to shoot because it made me feel close to Mom. That's all. Not because of programs, not because of records, because it made me remember her voice. Her words carved deeper than any accusation. Even Wells shifted, her composure cracking faintly. Knelt, steadying her granddaughter with a hand to the shoulder. And that's why you're dangerous to them, Penny, because you shoot for love, not glory. They'll never understand that. His lips trembled. She looked from her grandmother to her father, then back to the Admiral. So what happens now? The question hung heavy. Wells exhaled, her voice low. Now there will be decisions, testing, observation. The department will want to assess you further. No, snapped. There will be no more tests, no more watching her like a specimen. Mr. Wells began but stopped. Her headset crackled faintly with a signal. She pressed a hand to her earpiece, listening. Her expression shifted, subtle but sharp. She straightened, her voice clipped. We're out of time. His eyes narrowed. What do you mean? Wells looked past them toward the southern perimeter, where black SUVs were already cresting the ridge, engines growling, dust trailing behind them. Too many. Too fast. Unauthorized personnel, Wells said tightly. They shouldn't have cleared the gate. Smirk returned, cruel satisfaction etched into his voice. Looks like word traveled farther than you thought, Admiral. The vehicles braked hard, doors swinging open. Men in dark suits spilled out, too polished for contractors, too sharp for tourists. Their movements were coordinated, purposeful. Eyes hidden behind sunglasses, weapons holstered but obvious. His gut clenched. He stepped in front of his daughter instinctively. Who are they? Wells's face hardened. Not ours, not today. His hand brushed the small of her back where a sidearm rested, hidden but ready. Then they're here for her. His chest tightened, her pulse racing. She clutched her father's arm, confusion flooding in. Dad, what's happening? Forced his voice steady, though his hands shook. You stay behind me, do you hear me? Behind me. The men approached, their leader stepping forward with an ease that reeked of confidence. He smiled faintly, his voice calm. Admiral Wells, always a pleasure, will be taking custody now. Wells's tone was like steel. You have no authority here. Authority, the man said softly, almost amused. Isn't that what you told Lieutenant once, before you sent her into the Hindu Kush and left her to die? The name, spoken like a weapon. His heart stuttered. He moved closer to his daughter, shielding her completely now. Rose, her voice low but lethal. You speak her name again and you won't walk off this range. The man only smirked. The bloodline doesn't belong to you, or to the Navy. It belongs to history, and history, Admiral, doesn't wait politely. The tension snapped taut as wire. Wells's voice dropped, clipped and sharp. Dr. Pierce, get her out now. His pulse thundered. Her world blurred, her grandmother drawing her weapon, her father tightening his grip, the Admiral barking orders, the strangers advancing. The morning had begun with laughter, with ridicule, with steel plates ringing in proof. Now it was ending with something far darker. And as eyes locked on the approaching men, a single thought seared through her. Her skill had drawn them, her bloodline had summoned them. This wasn't about a girl on a firing range anymore. It was about who would claim her future. How quickly can a peaceful range turn into a battlefield? That thought stabbed through as the strangers fan across the gravel, their polished shoes crunching like boots of occupation. They weren't here for training. They weren't here for diplomacy. Every subtle motion screamed one truth: they had come to take. Clung to his arm, her small frame pressed tight against him. She had faced targets without flinching, but these weren't targets. These were men who looked at her like property. Colonel stepped forward before anyone else could react, his smug grin blooming like a wound. Finally, someone with sense. He gestured to the men in suits as if greeting allies. I warned you, Admiral, this was never about one little girl. This is bigger than Navy pride. His eyes narrowed, fury tightening her jaw. You sold her out. Didn't even deny it. I reported what happened here, what she did. You think you can hide miracles. The world pays attention when records shatter, and the Pentagon isn't the only one watching. Admiral Wells's voice was ice. You've compromised this base, Colonel. You've invited wolves to the table. Laughed a short, sharp bark. Wolves, maybe, but wolves win wars. You, Admiral, are clinging to myths about dignity. These men represent inevitability. The leader of the strangers smiled faintly, adjusting his cuff. Well said, Colonel. We don't intend harm, only custody. The girl belongs where her talents can be used. His breath hitched. I don't belong to anyone. The man's smile sharpened. Every prodigy belongs somewhere. Shifted her stance subtly, hand hovering near her weapon. Her voice cut low, steady. Take one more step toward her, and you'll learn what belonging costs. The air thickened. Operators along the sidelines who had once gathered only for curiosity now tensed. Some reached unconsciously toward holsters. Some froze, unsure where loyalty should land. His pulse thundered. He wanted to grab his daughter, to run, to vanish. But the range stretched wide, open, with nowhere to hide. They were surrounded by eyes, by power, by agendas too large to fight. Admiral Wells broke the stalemate. Her voice dropped, calm but commanding. Mr. Chief, you must decide right here, right now. how far you'll go to keep her free, because once this line is crossed, there is no going back. His eyes never left the stranger's. Her voice was iron. I've lived in shadows my whole life. I lost my daughter to them. I won't lose my granddaughter the same way. The strangers shifted, hands brushing jackets where weapons hid. And then everything shattered. A sharp crack split the air. Everyone froze. It wasn't a shot. It was the sound of gravel underfoot, exaggerated in the silence, had moved. He stepped directly toward the strangers, his posture proud, his smirk widening. "Enough of this theater," he barked. "The child goes with them. That's the only future she has. You're all too blind to see it." Lunged forward, fury boiling over. "She's my daughter. You don't get to decide her future." Spun on him, venom flashing. You're nothing but a grieving widower clinging to a fantasy. You think you can shield her. You couldn't even save your wife." The words hit like a blade. Staggered, rage blurring his vision, grief exploding raw. Gasped, clinging harder to his sleeve, her eyes wide with hurt. Moved like lightning. In 2 strides she was on, her fist driving into his chest with soldier's precision. He stumbled back, wheezing, his pride cracking at last under the weight of real defiance. But the damage was done. The strangers surged forward. Weapons cleared holsters, orders barked, operators shouted warnings. And swirled, erupted into chaos. She dropped to the ground instinctively, her mother's lessons echoing in her blood. Stay low, stay still, watch before you move. Her hands trembled, but her breathing slowed, her vision narrowing into focus. From her vantage point, she saw everything. The strangers advancing, her grandmother drawing, her father shielding, the Admiral commanding. She saw scrambling, torn between retreat and rage. And in that moment, clarity seared through her. This was what her mother had meant. Dignity didn't shout, it acted. Crawled forward, dragging her rifle case toward her. She snapped it open, hands moving with a speed born not of fear but of training ingrained. Her father shouted her name, panic in his tone, but she ignored it. The noise around her blurred into background. One motion at a time. Bolt open, chamber clear, magazine seated, bolt forward, safety on. She rose to her knees, the rifle snug against her shoulder. Her voice shook but carried. "Stop." The single word froze the field. Even the strangers paused, their guns raised but hesitant now, eyes flicking to the 12-year-old holding a weapon with the poise of a professional. Her heart pounded, but her stance was steady. She wasn't pointing at them, yet. Only downrange, the barrel angled enough to show control without recklessness. His voice softened, low enough only could hear. "That's it. Don't let them see fear. Control the silence. Make them move first." Inhaled, exhaled, her voice steadied. "I don't care who you are. I'm not leaving with you. Not today, not ever." The strangers shifted uneasily. They had expected compliance, not defiance, especially not from a child. The leader's smile faltered. For the first time, he looked unsettled. "Put the weapon down, girl. You don't want to escalate this." Her eyes didn't blink. "Neither do you." The standoff stretched, every breath a tremor. And then sirens. Base security vehicles tore into the range, tires spitting gravel, lights flashing red and blue. Armed Marines poured out, rifles shouldered, orders shouted. The strangers cursed, their leader snapping his fingers. Instantly they began withdrawing, sliding back into their SUVs with precision. Within seconds, engines roared and the convoy sped back over the ridge, swallowed by dust. Silence crashed down again. His rifle lowered slowly. Her hands shook violently now, the adrenaline burning out of her small body. She let it clatter to the ground and stumbled into her father's arms. He caught her, crushing her tight, his own chest heaving. Holstered her weapon with trembling fingers. She wasn't shaking from fear, she was shaking from rage, from memory, from the shadow of all the times she hadn't been there to protect her daughter. Admiral Wells spoke at last, her voice grim. This is what I warned you of. She's not safe, not outside, not inside. Her gift is no longer a secret. Pressed his lips to his daughter's hair, whispering fiercely, "She's mine. You don't get to decide what happens to her." But deep down, even as he spoke, he knew the truth. Today had proved something he couldn't erase. Wasn't just his daughter anymore. She was a legacy, a target. And history had already marked her. How do you go back to silence after the world has heard your shot? That question lingered in his mind as the last rays of sun bled into the Pacific horizon. The firing range, once filled with laughter and whispers, now lay hushed under the weight of what had happened. Marines guarded the perimeter, their presence a reminder that the world outside wasn't waiting patiently. Sat with his daughter on the back bumper of a Humvee, his arm draped protectively around her shoulders. She leaned against him, her eyes heavy, her small hands clutching the trident pendant so tight it left an imprint. Stood a few feet away, her profile etched against the fatting sky. Strong, steady, but her eyes betrayed the grief of a mother who had lost a daughter and returned only to find the same storm circling her granddaughter. Admiral Wells paced quietly, speaking in clipped tones into her headset. Her voice carried fragments of urgency, containment, non-sanctioned incursion, oversight review. Every word was a reminder that today would not stay buried. Reports would spread, questions would multiply. Finally broke the silence, her voice soft but firm. They looked at me like I wasn't even a person. Tightened his arm around her. You are a person, my daughter, that's all you'll ever be. Turned, her voice rough. No, that's all you want her to be, but she is more, whether any of us like it or not. He bristled, his jaw clenching. She's 12, don't talk about her like she's a weapon. Stepped closer, lowering her voice. You think I want that? You think I don't lie awake every night wishing I'd burned every skill I ever had before they could pass it on? But you can't fight blood. You can only guide it. If you don't, someone else will. Looked between them, her chest aching. What if I don't want it? What if I just want to be normal? The words cracked his heart. He cupped her face, his eyes wet. Then that's what you'll be. I'll fight anyone who says otherwise. But's gaze didn't waver. Normal isn't an option anymore. You proved that today. The truth landed like stone. Lowered her head, fighting tears she didn't want them to see. She hated the word legacy now. Legacy had stolen her mother, had hidden her grandmother, and had turned her into a prize for men in suits. Admiral Wells returned, her tone weary but controlled. The department is shaken. They won't admit what happened, but they'll want answers. You'll be contacted, pressured. She looked at, then at. And you'll be offered things, opportunities, protections, contracts. My advice, don't sign anything until you know the cost. His voice cracked with exhaustion. And the cost? Wells didn't answer directly. She only looked at and said softly, the cost is her childhood. Silence stretched again. The last light of day dipped below the horizon. One by one, security vehicles peeled away, leaving only shadows and the 3 generations of blood standing at the edge of history. Broke the silence at last, her voice steady but raw. Penny, when I was your age, I thought the world would only see me as a girl with a rifle. I thought maybe if I was good enough, they'd finally see me as human. But the truth is, people see what they want to see. And when they don't understand you, they'll try to own you. Swallowed hard, her chest rising and falling. So what do I do? Her grandmother stepped closer, placing both hands on her shoulders. You do what your mother did. You stand tall. You carry your gift with dignity. And when the world tries to claim you, you remind them that dignity doesn't shout. Her voice faltered, breaking just enough to reveal the wound beneath. It acts. The words cut deep into his heart. She had heard them before, whispered from her mother's lips in quiet moments. Now, hearing them echoed by the woman who had raised her mother, they felt less like advice and more like inheritance. She lifted her chin, meeting her grandmother's gaze. For the first time since the shots rang out that morning, she didn't feel like a child pretending at strength. She felt like a stood slowly, his hand resting on her back. If this is who she has to be, then she won't stand alone. Not again, not like did. His eyes softened. Then maybe this time the legacy won't break us, maybe it will bind us. The three of them stood together, silhouetted against the last traces of twilight, father, daughter, grandmother. Not soldiers, not projects, just family bruised but unbroken. Closed her eyes, whispering to herself, not for them but for the memory of the woman who had given her this gift. "I'll make you proud, Mom, but I'll do it my way." The night wind carried the words, soft and steady, into the darkness. And for the first time all day, her heart was calm. Because she understood now. Her skill wasn't a curse. It wasn't a prize. It was simply a truth. And truths don't need to shout. They act. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.